So I think it would be fair to say that most people would consider Walt Disney World more family oriented than Universal Orlando Resort. It's not to say that Universal's not for families or anything, it's just that I do believe that most people kind of associate it with the bigger thrill rides. I'm thinking Velocicoaster over at Islands of Adventure, or maybe like the Mummy or Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios. You know what I'm saying? Big kid rides. So the question is there anything to do for smaller kids at Universal? Well, I believe that there is. So in this video, I'm going to be listing my top 6 rides for younger visitors to Universal Orlando Resort. So the first ride on our list is going to be found over at Islands of Adventure, specifically Seuss Landing, and it's the Dr. Seuss High in the Sky trolley ride. Think of this as kind of a people mover like at Magic Kingdom, but for Dr. Seuss over at Islands of Adventure. So same sort of thing, you go up on an elevated track, you get really great views of the theme park surrounding, it's nice and relaxing, pretty slow moving. On this one you get told a story of the Sneetches, or you get like a best of review of Dr. Seuss audio coming through. It's fun, it's just a fun ride for smaller riders. Just a word of warning, you do need to be at least 36 inches tall to ride this, and if you are under 48 inches, you will need to ride it with an adult, or at least somebody who's over 48 inches. All in all, it's certainly a fun ride which my kids definitely enjoy. Next up on our list, we're going to be going over to Universal Studios Florida, and we're going to be visiting the E.T. Adventure. Now, we love the E.T. Adventure in our house. It definitely brings back all the nostalgic feelings of going when I was younger, but somehow it manages to remain kind of relevant for the younger kids, mainly because the movie's still kind of a big deal. It's never really gone anywhere. It's one of those films like Star Wars that it's just hanging around forever. In the ride, you actually get to board one of the flying bicycles from the movie with E.T. in the little basket there at the front. It's a lot of fun. Also, the queue line for E.T. is probably one of the best ones in any theme park ever. You're in a forest. It smells like a forest, it looks like a forest. It's amazing. I love it. It's just fantastic. Bearing in mind that this was an opening day attraction at Universal Studios Florida. So this ride's been around a really long time, and the theming is just like perfect. Also, fun fact, John Williams, who obviously wrote the soundtrack for E.T., actually wrote the soundtrack for the ride specifically as well, so you know you're onto a winner when John Williams is involved. Now, in order to ride E.T., you are going to have to be at least 34 inches tall, and if you're under 48 inches, you will need to be accompanied by an adult. Next on our list, and staying at Universal Studios Florida, is going to be Kang and Kodo's, I hope I said that right, Twirl and Hurl. Now, this is basically what I would like to call a roundy round ride. It's pretty much a carbon copy of, say, like the Dumbo elephants over at Magic Kingdom. Same deal, only you're going to be getting in a flying saucer and whizzing around a Simpsons themed ride rather than a Dumbo themed ride, or an Aladdin themed ride, or a Triceratops themed ride. You get they're all the same pretty much. This is just a good way of getting people who might be fans of the Simpsons but maybe are too small to ride the main simulator ride, getting them involved in the whole Springfield Simpsons vibe. The great news is with this ride that anybody can ride it because there is no minimum height requirement. Just be aware that once again, if you are below 48 inches, you will need to be accompanied by an adult. Alright, for the next ride on our list, we are going to be staying at Universal Studios Florida, and we're going to be heading over to Woody Woodpecker's Kids Zone for the Woody Woodpecker Nut House Coaster. Now, this is what they call a junior roller coaster, or in other words, it's like a starter coaster for kids. You do need to be 36 inches or taller to ride it, but it's not too intense. It only gets up to a top speed of, I think, 22 miles an hour, and there are a few dips and stuff, but nothing too wild. Also, it's a super short ride, so if stuff does start to go wrong and people aren't loving it, it's over before you know it, so things can't get too traumatizing for everybody. But it is a super fun ride, and I know a few of my children, this has actually been their first roller coaster, and they certainly enjoyed it, and for that reason, it makes it onto this list. Next up on this list, Universal Studios is really on a roll. We're staying at Universal Studios Florida, and we're going to be checking out Despicable Me, Minion, Mayhem. Now, there is a height requirement for Despicable Me of 40 inches. However, there is also stationary seating available. So if you've got somebody in your party who doesn't quite make the 40 inches, they can still enjoy the experience by joining in and sitting on the stationary seating. So it's pretty inclusive for basically everybody. In this ride, you join Gru, Margot, Edith, Agnes, and of course the Minions on a super fun simulation ride through Gru's laboratory and beyond. One thing I do want to note about this attraction is that it used to be a 3D attraction and it isn't anymore. So if you're expecting 3D, no dice, it's not 3D anymore. I do think this has detracted a little from the overall experience of this ride, but overall it's still a good time and we still enjoy it, and for that reason it's on the list. Now before we get to our number 1 spot, I do want to give a few honourable mentions to some rides that didn't make it on this list. No particular reason, but I needed to keep the list to a top 6, so they didn't quite make it. Over at Islands of Adventure, back to Seuss Landing, you've got 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Now this is basically a carbon copy of the Twirl and Hurl ride we talked about earlier, but the reason I chose Twirl and Hurl instead of this is on this ride you actually get wet, and I know some people are not super cool with getting wet, so for that reason Twirl and Hurl went on and not this, but effectively they are basically the same ride. My kids actually really like this one as well because it's hot in Florida and they like getting wet. Another ride at Seuss Landing, in fact just across the way from 1 fish 2 fish, is the Carousel, which is a classic carousel type ride. Didn't make the list because there's nothing particularly unique about it other than I guess the things that you're actually riding on kind of look funky and Dr. Seussy, but it's basically a carousel, and when you've rode one you have rode them all. And then heading over to Marvel Superhero Island, there's the Storm Force Accelatron. Now this is basically the teacups at Magic Kingdom, so if you're familiar with Magic Kingdom and you've ever rode the teacups, that is pretty much what this is, but with X-Men theming. Lots of spinning, lots of dizziness, flashing lights because it's Storm Force, so it's kind of thunder and lightning going on. It's actually a lot of fun, but it's basically the teacups. And for number 1 on my list, we're going to be heading back to Islands of Adventure for the Pteranodon Flyers at Jurassic Park. Now Pteranodon Flyers is pretty unique in the way it does its rider height requirements, I guess you call it. You have to be at least 36 inches to ride the ride, but if you're riding alone you can't be taller than 56 inches. In other words, you got to be a kid, is what they're saying. It's a true kids ride. The only way that anybody taller than that can ride it, say an adult, is if they have a child with them. So I cannot just go and ride that ride. They won't let me on it. But if I was taking a child on, it was over 36 inches, I'm golden. I don't know why they do it that way, it's a weird thing, but it's an awesome, awesome ride. Now Universal describes this ride as a kids ride where little adventurers will get an amazing view as they slowly soar around in a comfy seat suspended from the track above, which I think is a good description because that's basically what this ride is. Now I've never been on this ride, but my children and my wife have, and they all love it, so I'm sure you will too. And you know something else I think you'll love? This video here, where we check out the top rides for toddlers at Walt Disney World.